God damn it, that's in there. Okay, I'm gonna show a quick assembly of this, how to put it together, which gear teeth go together, and all that magical stuff. It's kind of a big flailing mess, and I'll just show you guys. Hey YouTube, this is the gearbox that I made and put on Thingiverse. I made a previous video about this, but didn't describe it well enough, so I'm gonna make another one. So I'm gonna disassemble this so I can show you guys. Oh. Okay, I printed all of these parts with 0% infill. These I printed with a 1.2 wall thickness. This I printed with just a 1 millimeter wall thickness, and these I printed with about a 2 millimeter wall thickness, I think. The important thing is that the sun gear that you're driving, make sure you print that at 100% solid. That's pretty important. I've had one of these round off after I ran it with a drill for about 5 to 10 minutes or something like that. Eventually I rounded the teeth right off of it. But if that's the only failure mode, I'm pretty happy with it. So these gears didn't even get damaged, and these are the gears that were in the gear set when that happened. When this gear rounded off, this is a new print obviously, and they have no damage. I mean, you can't see anything on them, it's surprising. And these are printed completely with no infill. They're printed at 0% infill with probably a 1.2 or 2 millimeter wall thickness. Okay, so these two ring gears are actually different. They may look the same on Thingiverse, but this one actually has 36 teeth and this one has 38 teeth, and it's really important that you print both of them. Don't just click on one and duplicate it. It won't work that way. You can't assemble it with the two of the same ring gears. You need the two different ones. They're different in teeth, but they're actually the same on the outside. So I'll show you guys this. They're the same outside diameter, and the notches are in the same place. And they both have got a gap in them. So recently, a couple days before making this video, I made an update on these gears. Now they have arrows on them because phasing these gears is pretty important. I'll show you guys that in just a minute here. And it's really important to orient the gears like this because of the fact that there is 14 teeth on one side of this and there's 12 teeth on the other side of this. And if you look at it really closely, and you can even do this on Thingiverse, on Thingiverse, you could see that these two teeth are lined up here, but then if you go a few more teeth, these two teeth are this tooth is completely centered between these two. And that's why it's important to phase these gears. I didn't realize that at first, and because of that I scaled them down because the gearbox would bind up and it would get really tight. This is what the gear should look like when you properly phase this gearbox, when it's assembled correctly. As you can see, there's many ways that the gears can actually sit in there. You could point them at each other, the arrows, or you could point them like I show in the picture on Thingiverse. You can use this gap in the top of the gear as a reference, but you don't need to, because the gears only need to be referenced to each other. It doesn't matter where this ring is. They only need to be referenced to each other. If you have these arrows crooked and going every which way, this gearbox will actually really be tight and it'll bind up. So if you look at the files on Thingiverse, you can see that the planet gears, these are the gears that orbit the sun gear, which is, there's actually two sun gears. One sun gear is bigger and one sun gear is smaller, and there's a reason for that. I'll go into that later. But one end of the planet gear is actually bigger than the other end, and that's because that end has 14 teeth. This end of the planet gear has 14 teeth. This end of the planet gear has only 12. The reason that the planet gears have 12 teeth on one end and 14 teeth on the other end is that's what's actually causing the gear reduction here. So when the planet gear, this is the sun gear, it goes in the center like the solar system, and so when the planet gear, this gear, say, I'm gonna put this at the gap. Okay, the gap in the ring is right here. When this gear makes a full rotation around, when this 12 tooth, when the smaller end of this planet gear makes a full rotation around this 36 tooth ring, it's engaging 36 teeth along the way. At the same time, because this 14 tooth planet gear is engaging this ring, this 14 tooth gear is engaging 38 teeth along the way. And if I can get this to mesh right, I'll show you guys that. So in a full rotation, this one is engaging 36 teeth to a 12 tooth gear, and this one is engaging 14 teeth to a 38 tooth gear. Now if you do the math on that, if you divide 12 by 36, it's 0.3 repetant, and if you divide 14 divided by 38, you get 0.384. And because obviously 0.3 repetan and 0.384 are not equal, it causes a difference in the spinning speed of this. You know, it's either going to try to cause a difference in that speed, or else it's going to try to cock this gear to one side or the other. And that can't happen because the way I've done the double herringbone gear on here, or the helix, double helix. It's not really a helix, but because I've designed the gears the way I have, and I got this idea from, I thought of this when I printed this thing out, this weird bearing thing, and it's really cool, but that's where I came up with the idea. Okay, so for these sun gears and this ring gear, it's actually, there's only one way that this ring gear will actually engage the sun gear. So, for example, the ring gear and the sun gear will engage this way, but they will not engage this way. And just because the sun gear engages one of the ring gears does not mean that that's the ring gear it's intended to engage. All the gears are the same tooth pitch, or whatever you call it. So for example, this gear engages this gear, and this gear engages this gear, and this gear, and this gear, and every which way that they're not really intended to be put together. So just because things fit together in this gearbox doesn't mean that they go together. I didn't bother to design the gears in a way that you can't put them together wrong. I'm going to show a quick assembly of this, how to put it together, which gear teeth go together, and all that magical stuff. It's kind of a big flailing mess, and I'll just show you guys. So this right here, this is the 36 tooth ring gear, and I'm going to check which way this gear fits into this gear by going like this. If the teeth engage, the ring gear is the right way. If the teeth don't engage, you have to flip the ring gear around. In this case, this is the correct way. I'm going to go ahead and set this ring gear right here. Now, I've set this ring gear right here in a way that face up is the way that it goes in, and then the other thing you have to check is which way this ring gear goes on. If the teeth engage, you have it the right way. If they don't, you have to flip it and then find out which way they go. And now you can see that this one goes this way, so I'm going to lay this one down over here. Now I have this gear and I have to keep holding it this way. So this is a 36 tooth ring gear, and I've already figured out which way the teeth engage to it. Now with the 36 tooth ring gear, I want to use the small end, or the 12 tooth end of the Planet gear. So I want to use the 12 tooth end of the ring gear, or the 36 tooth ring gear with the 12 tooth end of the Planet gear. Now with that, I'm going to use another 12 tooth sun gear with the 12 tooth end of the Planet gear, and this end needs to go into this ring gear. Now, as you can see, this sun gear doesn't have actually any grip in it. It's not meant to go on the shaft for the stepper motor. It's hollow. And this is actually the driven sun gear. This sun gear doesn't do anything except for space out these Planet gears and hold them tight against this ring. In this application anyways. So, okay, so now I got two of the Planet gears in here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this opening in the ring to slide this one down here. And just as the picture on Thingiverse shows, you want to have the bottom arrow facing straight up and the bottom right arrow facing straight up. And it really doesn't matter, you know, where the gap in the ring is, as long as you reference these to each other. So as long as the bottom one's facing straight up and the right one is facing straight up, it doesn't matter where the gap in the ring is. It's just, I found it easy to assemble it this way. And actually it might be slightly easier to go like this and turn it a little bit, because then I can use the gap in the ring to my advantage. So once you get those two facing straight up, you take and you put this one in, and then you want to face this one straight down. Okay, so now I've got these three gears in here, and I'll show you. I've got them phased. They look right. It's really hard to tell because it seems like they're a little bit off, but they really shouldn't be. They should actually be pretty much right on. So then I'll go and put this top gear in, I'll call it, and just shift it around until it's facing straight down. This one's facing straight down. This one is facing straight up. This one is facing straight up. So perfectly 90 degrees apart. And this is how you phase this gearbox. Now the next thing that you do is you need to take, so since this is the 12 tooth sun gear and the 12 tooth end of the Planet gears, you'll need the 10 tooth sun gear on the other end. And the easy way to do this is you can either stick this in there this way and it'll go in halfways, and then you know that you actually have to flip it around for it to go in the other way. The other thing you can do is you could try to mesh it with the outside of this gear, and if it doesn't mesh with that gear, then you know you have to flip it this way, and it'll save you from jamming it in there and having to pull it back out. So that gear popped in there. It didn't pop in there very easy, but it popped in there. Unfortunately, this is the wrong gear to drive it with the stepper motor, and I'll have to pull that back out again. So I'm going to check which way this meshes, and if it meshes that way, you keep it the same way, pop it in between all three of these. Sometimes this gearbox really just doesn't work. So right now, even though I've got all my gears phased, it still doesn't seem like it's very good. It's not very centered in there. And that's because one of my gears is wrong somehow. See what I did right there? I can't explain how it didn't look like it was good, but it was. And all I needed to do was skip one tooth with this gear, was holding the whole thing up. It's really confusing, but if these gears aren't meshing right, you need to kind of work them around and figure out what's going on. This gearbox will wear itself out eventually if you don't have these phased right. Now you take your other ring gear, and I had this set down the way that it needed to go on, and now I picked it up and I forgot to pay attention to that, so I'm just gonna have to figure it out. Well, there's an easy way to do that. If this gear fits halfways on these, which it is right now, that means you have to turn it around, bend it open, and just pop it right on. And that is the wrong way. That's how you know, because it just doesn't fit. Yeah, that's the wrong way. Okay, so to put this on, you take the painted side, get it? The painted side. And you just clip it right on there. Okay, now I have to check and see, make sure none of my gears are actually grinding with each other, because if they are, then they must not be phased right. And they're not. You could see that they actually changed. They changed while I was doing the other gears, and that's another thing to be careful for, because that's happened to me a couple times now. So I'm going to see these two are right and these two are suddenly wrong. And the good thing is that I have these gaps in the rings, and I can adjust them if the gaps in the rings are in the same spot. So I'm just going to spin this a bunch until they are. Now keep in mind that when I do this, the sun gears actually aren't spinning the same speed, but they're spinning close enough to where I can kind of hold both of them, and it helps put some torque on them. Okay, now when the gaps in the rings are in the same spot, it just makes it a lot easier to work with things. So, being these two are closer to the gap, I'm going to use that to my advantage and try to turn this one first. How did these change? I just don't get it. Okay, so now I got 3 of the 4 right. Now this one needs to make a 1 gear up this way. There we go. So now all those arrows look like they're parallel to each other. This one's down. This one's up. This one's down. This one's up. Well, what the fuck? Oh, because I fucking spun it. You know what? They're parallel to each other, and I'm guessing that if I turn this enough times, they would eventually be up, up, down, down. Just assuming. And as long as that's okay, I'm okay with it. The other thing is to look how even the gaps are between the gears. If there's pretty even gaps between the gears, your phasing is probably good. Because if you look, if I just rotate this a few degrees, all of a sudden, you know, my drawing that I showed you would be like, oh, you're crazy. Because now this one's left, left, right, right. But then if you turn it this way, it's actually down, down, up, up. Or if you turn it this way, it's the same fucking thing. Now, this motor enclosure, here's my stepper motor. Don't buy these. This thing sucks. This thing is so weak. Even with this gearbox, I can almost stop it. So I'm going to go ahead and bolt my motor enclosure to my stepper motor. I wanted to tell you guys, be really careful. This sun gear, I'm planning on driving this sun gear. That'll give me the 49:1 gear ratio. Your stepper motor shaft is actually long enough to reach all the way through one sun gear and touch the other one. And it'll just rub against it if it's the same length as this one, and this one is 22.3 millimeters long. If you've got the same length of shaft, your stepper motor will actually rub up against the other sun gear while this thing is rotating. And if you decided to print out both sun gears with this D shaft hole in them, it could engage it, and that would cause a lot of problems because this sun gear actually spins a different speed than this one. I'm going to go ahead and bolt this onto my NEMA 17 mount, and this is just your average NEMA 17 stepper motor. Okay, so the screws that I have for this are tapered heads, and they are 8.75 millimeters long. And they are maybe even a little bit longer than they should be because they actually collide with the screws in the motor. If you don't have shorter screws, you can put washers on here and space the motor off this enclosure a little bit. Oh, by the way, before I bolt this on here, you realize the big hole in the bottom of this thing? You won't see that on Thingiverse because the original model of this, there was a little tiny plate that made it just slightly larger than the shaft size on this NEMA 17 motor. Well, as soon as I printed this out, it was just like a very thin, maybe a layer or two of plastic in there, and it was already kind of broken, so I just broke that out of there, and then I updated the model. So you won't have this when you download this. Okay, so just getting the motor, NEMA 17 motor tightened up to this mount. Of course, it fits fucking perfectly. Look at that. Nice and tight. I'm only going to put 2 bolts in it because who gives a fuck. Anyways, so this is how you change the gear ratio on this thing. Right here I've got my gear that I'm going to drive. This is the gear that I'm not going to drive. But if I had put in the gear that's labeled drive sun 37 to 1, I would insert this thing this way. Because this is the 12-tooth sun gear, 12-tooth end of all the Planet gears. If you want the 37 to 1 gear ratio, you insert it this way. And as I showed you earlier, this thing actually fits in both ways. So since I've actually got the sun gear that's down right now, since that one actually is intended to be the driven sun, or the one that just spaces these gears out, I have to insert this the other way. God damn it, that's in there. Okay, got it. So I intend to put this in there, and then this is actually, you can't see it because it's rounded out because I fucking stuck an Allen wrench in it. But this is a D-shaped hole, and it fits onto this stepper motor shaft really well. So I'm going to get that set up. Okay, so what I usually do is I find the flat part of the shaft and I make that perpendicular to the gap in the rings, and that makes it really easy to know where it is. So being as my rings aren't perfectly aligned, I'm going to make it perpendicular to the gap on this ring because this is the ring that I plan on putting in here. And that gap is actually going to line up with one of these slots. Now you'll notice that this actually has 7 notches on the outside of it, and the 8th one is actually the gap in the ring. So this gap in the ring is centered on where this notch would be if this gap wasn't here. So if I line this D shaft up with one of those notches that this goes into, this thing should slip right in. So I'll line the gap in the ring up with one of those notches and pop it in. Now, if you're doing this for the first time on your own, I would really suggest taking that gear and putting it on the stepper motor shaft without anything else on it, because otherwise it's going to be really hard to get it in. And the other thing you have to do is once you do put this together, you want to push that gear down a little bit with the screwdriver. So just reach in there, try to feel for that other sun gear, push that gear down on the stepper motor shaft a little bit further than it is, otherwise it'll sit and try to center itself on these Planet gears, and it will never be able to because it's a really tight fit. And it was intended that way so it doesn't end up spinning on the motor shaft. Now you can see how much slop is in this thing. Approximately none. Okay, so after that, I'm going to put this cover on. And you can see a nice clean gearbox installation. So, another idea I came up with this was, well, what if someone wants to put this upside down and hang some weight on this part of it? Wouldn't the cap just come off? And the answer is no. The cap would just come off unless that happens, and I can't believe that just happened. But there's a solution for both of those two things, and that is filament. take some 3D printing filament. I sized this for 1.75 millimeters, and I put 2 little holes on the outside of this enclosure. This was one of the updates, and you can actually thread this filament in here. And if you've got a really torquey a stepper motor, and you don't need much torque here, because it's gonna starve some of your torque out of this gearbox by having this filament in here. This filament actually makes it impossible to pull this cap off, and that's the other thing to be careful with. Is once you put this in here, if you don't get it back out, you won't get this apart without breaking it. So I'm gonna hook this thing up. I'm gonna drive it for you guys. I'm gonna pull this filament out so it doesn't get stuck in here, because I don't want to deal with that. But if you never have to take this thing apart, you could just as well shove a I would suggest probably just shoving a couple little pieces of filament in there rather than all the way around, because it doesn't need that. Maybe in a future update I'll set it up to where you push it in one side and it comes out to, you know, a couple centimeters later, and maybe once on the other side, or maybe 4 corners or something. So there it is, guys. Really slow gearbox. That's about as fast as I can get this little stepper motor to drive this gearbox, because this stepper motor sucks. And I'll take the lid off and show you guys what's going on inside. So here's the max amount of power I can get out of this thing. I can hold it pretty much as hard as I can, and it still tries to spin in my hand, and it's really slow because I've turned it all the way down. It turns out these stepper motors have more torque when they're driving slow than they do when they're going fast, but this thing is pretty torquey because it is 49 turns of the motor to 1 full rotation of this. Sensibly, it is going to have a lot of torque to it, but it's also really slow when it's that powerful. So I'm trying to give you an idea of how much backlash this thing has. It isn't much. I'll shut this motor off. There isn't very much backlash in this gearbox at all. If you could see it, just a little bit there. And if you want less backlash, what you have to do is download the Planet gears. That is came apart the wrong way again. Huh. Download these Planet gears and scale them by what was it again? Scale them up by 1.003, and if that's not enough, if that doesn't get rid of the backlash in the gearbox, try scaling them up by 1.0061, and phase them correctly, and that should get rid of any backlash. In fact, if you scale them up by 1.0061, you're probably going to need a much bigger stepper motor than this to drive them. Hey, thanks for watching.